Hi there, I'm Nancy Nash with Starfish Strength, and I'm passionate about making food that is both delicious and nutritious. Today, I want to share a recipe with you for a salmon and corn chowder that is spicy, savory, and satisfying. Most of us don't feel like we have time to cook every single night, and that is one of the reasons I am a really big fan of soups. You can make a big batch of soup, and you can either refrigerate some for next time or freeze leftovers. So I'm excited that today's soup features 3 ingredients that I feel have an unjustified bad reputation. The first one is canned salmon. I grew up in a big family, and we were, always trying to think about cost-conscious recipes, and I did try a couple types of canned salmon, and I absolutely hated them. But Wild Planet has changed my mind. Their canned salmon tastes very close to fresh salmon, and that's what we're going to be featuring in today's recipe. We're also going to be featuring potatoes and corn, 2 vegetables that I hear a lot of negative feedback about. They're too starchy, they're too, carby, they're throwaway carbs. I disagree. They're both a great source of fiber. They're great for your digestion. You get a lot of vitamins and minerals just naturally when you eat whole foods. So I think by the time you see the nutritional information on this recipe and you get a chance to taste it, you'll agree that they make a very delicious and nutritious addition. So we're going to start by rinsing our potatoes thoroughly and just removing any bits of dirt or eyes that you see. And I'm using golden potatoes today. You could also use Idaho potatoes. However, there is a huge size discrepancy between potatoes. So I'm going to use 5 to 6 medium golden potatoes. And if you're using some really large Idaho potatoes, you might just need 2 or 2.5. So I'm going to cut the potatoes in half and then cut them in half again. And I'm going to just roughly cut up my potatoes into approximately 1-inch cubes. So I'm leaving the skin on my potatoes today. You can remove it if desired, but that is where some of that fiber and vitamins and minerals lie. In the golden potatoes, it's actually very, very thin, and I feel like you barely notice it. So once your potatoes are cut, set those to the side. And now we're going to rinse and dry our peppers and our zucchini. So I'm going to cut my pepper up, removing the seeds and stem. So I like to cut the top off, kind of pull out that seeds and stem, and then cut them into slices. And then from there, I can kind of roughly chop them. So I'm using 2 sweet bell peppers and 2 poblanos. Now you could substitute 2 green bell peppers for the poblanos if you're a person that finds poblanos particularly spicy. If you like more spice, you could substitute a couple jalapenos for one of the poblanos. You can definitely flex this recipe to your heat preference or that of your family. So next, I'm going to cut the ends off of my onion, peel the outer layer off, and then I'm going to cut it in half. And then I'm going to mince this, as fine as I can get it. So I'm going to cut it into slices and then turn it and cut it again. So go ahead and set your peppers and onion aside together. So cutting up our zucchini, I'm going to cut off the ends, and then I'm going to slice them in half. And then I'm just going to slice them into like half moon shapes. So they'll turn out to be about 1/4 inch thick. And if you've got some really big zucchini, you might want to cut them in half again. And then I've got my potatoes and my zucchini in separate bowls, just because we're going to add them at slightly different times to cook them so that everything comes out great. And then I'm going to slice up my green onions, which I'm going to use to top this. That's completely optional. And I want to mince up my dill. So I'm going to take off those big woody stems. But if you've got some really thin stems, those are okay to mince up. So I'm going to use a medium-large cooking pot. You could use a pot that's a lot larger than this, but we're just making 8 servings, so it's not necessary if you don't want to do all that scrubbing. I'm going to spray the bottom of my pot with nonstick cooking spray and turn it on medium-high heat. And then I'm going to add my onions and peppers. I'm going to cook them for 8 to 10 minutes covered, just stirring them every couple minutes. So we're just trying to saute them and just kind of remove like that harsh bitter taste. You should see that the onions start to soften and they change in color a little bit, but we're not cooking them to the point where they start looking translucent. And your vegetables are still going to look pretty bright after the end of this 8 to 10 minutes. So you can think of this as like cooking them kind of halfway. So once your vegetables have softened and released some liquid, go ahead and shut off the heat. And then we're just going to set them to the side. To that same pot, I'm going to add my potatoes along with 6 cups of water and turn the burner on high heat. I am going to cover this though because we're going to use this liquid because it will be starchy and it will help thicken our soup a little bit. So we don't really want it to boil off. After about 5 minutes covered, we should find that our water reaches a boil, and at that point we're going to add our zucchini. So I'm going to give this a good stir with a long spoon or ladle, cover it with a lid, and let it come to a boil again, which will probably take another 5 minutes. I'm going to give it a good stir and turn the heat down to medium-high and cook it another 5 minutes until it looks like the zucchini and the potatoes are maybe halfway cooked. And at this juncture, you could test them with a fork. You want to see that they're still a little beyond al dente. They should not be mushy at all. So at this point, I'm going to add my onions and peppers back into the pot along with my corn. And I'm using 2 cups of frozen corn here. If you had some corn on the cob that you had left over, you could always cut that off the ear and use that in place, and that should work great too. I'm also going to add my 2 6-ounce cans of Wild Planet salmon, 1 teaspoon of fresh cracked black pepper, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, and 2 tablespoons of my minced fresh dill. So I'm going to cook this for about 5 minutes, just stirring it constantly, making sure that everything is cooking evenly. Remember, the corn is frozen, and then we really want those herbs well incorporated into the flavor of this soup. So just before we turn off the heat, we're going to check our potatoes again. So I'm going to use either a fork or a knife and just make sure that it easily enters the center of it. You really do want those potatoes to be perfectly fork tender, and then you'll know everything else is done too. So once you've reached that point, go ahead and shut off the heat. And then we're going to really slowly add our milk. So I'm adding 2 cups of fairlife ultra filtered fat-free milk. And I'm stirring it as I slowly add it just to make sure that we don't get any curdling because we have something cold being added to something warm. So we want everything to start tempering and evening out. And then once your milk is added, we're going to squeeze 1 tablespoon of fresh lemon juice into the soup and then just give it one more quick stir to make sure it gets dispersed throughout. So I would allow this to cool for about 10 minutes before serving. Because we did just add cold milk, it's actually going to cool down quicker than you think, but we definitely don't want scalding vegetables to burn anybody's mouth. So I'm going to recommend topping this with some light sour cream, your favorite sauerkraut, and a little bit of fresh dill. And you could always top this with a little more smoked paprika or some fresh cracked black pepper. And I can see there's a really big chunk of salmon in here, even though we did break some of it up. And I think, that's kind of fun when you make like a beef stew, right? Like it's kind of nice to have like a big chunk of meat. I think it's part of what makes this really satisfying. So let's go ahead and give it a taste. I love the sweetness from the corn coming through. I'm a person that really loves salmon, and I love that fresh fish taste, which the Wild Planet salmon really seems to have. Not like the canned salmon that I grew up with. So I'm going to be honest, I have a history with dill. The first time I ever made something with it, I was tasked with making grape leaves in French class, and I way overdid it. And I just assumed that it was a powerful flavor, and some people hated it and some people loved it, like people feel about cilantro. But I can say that balance of the dill in this really makes it great. And then I do really enjoy sour flavors too. So you've got the sweetness of the corn and the peppers and the Vidalia onion contrasting with that sauerkraut. And I really enjoy that balance. So if you're a person that really likes dynamic dishes, I think you'll really enjoy this. And I think this keeps in the refrigerator for, 5 to 7 days. Use your discretion, but it freezes excellently. So if you don't think you're going to use 8 portions this week, feel free to freeze 2 portions at a time. That's exactly what I like to do. And then I have like an arsenal of frozen soups that I can pull out and use. Thanks so much for making time to cook with me today. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. If you did, please check out the rest of my YouTube channel, where you'll find more healthy recipes, workouts, and other exercise and healthy lifestyle tips. If you need some one-on-one support with your exercise and nutrition program, please reach out to me in the link in the description. And in the meantime, I look forward to continuing this journey with you, and I'll see you in the next video. If you have a dog or a cat and you have a heart, make sure you set aside a little bit of salmon that you don't add poblano to, because this is good for them too. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. That was my fault. Good boy. Good boy. Thank you for being so quiet during that. Did a good job. Do you want to say hi? Say hi. Good job.